So what I first want to do is paint quite a broad context with what we're working in today and why we need to revisit really what good leadership and management looks like. And then to discuss how we might develop these skills in this new context. Seeing leadership in context is really critical. So it's worth reviewing this context to remind ourselves of the incredibly changing environment and the challenging environment we're working in and why it's so very, very tough to be a good leader today. Let's just look at some of the changes that have happened in the last 15 years, let alone the last 15 months, let alone the last 15 days. The global economy, obviously trade and competition are increasingly global. It's no longer possible, as we've seen in the last few months, for any country to be insulated from the economic performance or decisions of other countries. The old centres of world trades are shifting. With global competition comes the relentless pursuit of increased productivity, faster paced, product innovation, etc. So the source of our competitive advantage in this information and service economy is increasingly our people, and we're seeing this more so than ever. The impact of technology, again, just to remind ourselves of the impact the internet has had and continues to have. Already large areas of repetitious clerical work have completely gone. The digital age is upon us, and actually trying to remember what life was like pre-broadband is increasingly difficult. Quality and consumerism. Again, these are things we've learned to live with, but have actually only been in our lives for the last 10 or 15 years. Expectations for quality and service have risen phenomenally. Society in general is expecting higher standards of service, of choice, in all aspects of our lives, from the range of breads in the shops through to the choices we want to make about where we send our children to school. Certainly over the last 10 years, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 5. Increasingly, price no longer determines competitiveness. Consumer markets in developed economies have become much more sophisticated. They're looking for total product quality, more product individuality, more innovation, and certainly more service. And this consumerism is being brought into our organisations, with individuals wanting to be treated with the same level of respect and care they experience as customers. Let's look at work expectations and skills. 20 years ago, there was an assumption that a set of skills or a body of professional knowledge would equip you for life. Well, we know today that there's no such thing as a job for life. Just because you've entered an industry or profession, that's not it. We know people will make massive changes in their jobs and careers. Career paths are actually going to become quite confused. People will no longer be looking for just things like title or money. They're looking for things like recognition. They're looking for things like the willingness of an organisation to invest in their employability. And against this economic maelstrom that we're in, the vast social changes that are impacting on the workforce are also, on whom we depend, are also making our business demands even more compelling. Let's look at some of those demographics. The shifting size and composition of the labour pool is having a significant effect. We know that in this decade we'll see women take a dominant position in the workforce. It's estimated that by the end of this decade, we're only a couple of years away, only 15% of those entering the workforce globally will be white males, not to mention the greying population, which is increasingly going to see a shift of power to the elderly. Then there's the so-called Generation X and Generation Y, the 20 to 35-year-olds, where the deal is, I will offer my services in return for you making me more employable elsewhere. Now, these are new deals that we haven't actually had to negotiate before with our people. They want things like meaningful work, yet we haven't designed our organisations to be meaningful. We've tried to organise them to be efficient. So at a time of unique economic turbulence and extraordinary demands on our organisations, when as employers today we expect much more of our people, we want them to have a wider range of skills, to be up for many more tasks and duties, and to increase their work effort, we have this very adaptive generation of educated young people who are starting to think that the effort-reward ratio is out of balance. So, as leaders and managers, we are therefore under pressure to get more from less, to pick up the pace, to transform our organisations, to compete in this new world. And we're in a service and information economy, so all we have to do that with is our people, and they are changing fundamentally in their expectations of what they want from their working life. So it is a tough time, requiring new skills, new ways of thinking, new ways of operating, because the reality is, in this new world, what made us successful in the past is not what's going to make us successful in the future. So what does this mean to what's required of us as leaders and managers, and what therefore is required of us in terms of management development? I'd like to preface our discussion around this by talking about paradigms, this wonderful piece of New Age jargon that everyone's been talking about in the last few weeks, because as this axis has shifted, it's becoming much clearer that that's what's happening. The reality is the economic and social shifts we're experiencing are paradigm shifts. That is, they're a fundamental change in our worldview, and we need to understand that if we're going to respond appropriately to what this new environment is asking of us. So let's talk about paradigms. What are they? To explain a paradigm shift, I'd like to tell you a story about paradigms, and for those of you who have heard it, then bear with me. There's this man driving down the road. It's a beautiful day. He's in his favourite sports car. He's driving through his favourite country lane, and just before he gets to a corner, a car comes around the other side of the road, and it's careering all over the road, and just before they collide, the car swerves to the side, and he looks and sees there's a woman driving, and as she drives, she yells out, "Pig!" And he's furious. How dare she call him a pig? He's so mad that he changes down really fast, turns the corner, and smacks straight into the pig. So from his existing paradigm of you call me a name, I'll call you a name, he was actually blinded to the warning she was giving him about what lay ahead. So what's a paradigm? Paradigms are just sets of rules. They enable us to organise the world. They establish boundaries. They tell us how to be successful by solving problems within those boundaries. They filter our incoming experience all the time. We view the world through our paradigms all the time. We constantly select data that supports the world and the rules and regulations that these paradigms constitute. And although paradigms are really useful because they give us rules for what works in our world, we also have to be aware of being very limited by our paradigms, personally and professionally. And the point of talking about paradigms is that new times demand new perspectives. What worked for us yesterday isn't going to work for us today. The rules are being broken today more than ever. Our paradigms are shifting. And they're shifting because the established rules of the game no longer effectively solve our problems. How we lead organisations to find new solutions to these problems is at the heart of our survival moving forward. Paradigms are important. They focus our attention, they concentrate our efforts on what we've decided is important. They give us the confidence to solve problems. But they can also block our vision to the future because they seduce us with their success. And when confronted with a profoundly new way of addressing problems, new ways of moving forward, we often reject it because it doesn't fit the rules that we're already so good at. Today we're being required to re-examine our paradigms about what certainly constitutes good leadership and management. And if we do, organisations may not look like anything that they are today. The practice of leadership and management may be nothing like what we know it today. So management used to be summed up as planning, organising and controlling, and planning, organising and controlling is important when all we have to do is manage complexity. But what we need to do today is do more than manage complexity. And I think sometimes we made it more complex than we needed it to be. We made it more complex by assuming that people were essentially stupid, that they were essentially untrustworthy, and that work was something you endured for the most part, and what you tried to avoid for the rest. We saw organisational life as survival of the fittest, where the fittest were the toughest, the most decisive, or the most senior. So that might have been an okay framework when all we needed to do was manage complexity. But what the challenge of this century will be, and we're getting a taste of it now, is our ability to cope with, manage and lead change in highly, highly ambiguous and unknown situations. And this is going to require a different approach. Doing it a few % better every year is no longer a formula for success. Major changes are more and more necessary to compete effectively in this new environment, and more change will always demand more leadership.